Okay, before I get into this video, I'm just going to show something I forgot to in the last video was 3 of my Montells from my personal collection. Uh, they are broken, as you can see, but I just want to show them to you. These are all very thin. The edge is a little bit crude on this one, so it may have been broken in manufacture. Looks like the edge is either well used or not finished. This one is also thin. The edge is pretty good on this side. It looks like it was finished. Sometimes the edges are not finished down near the barb on the completed ones, but this edge is pretty much done here. You see one of the last flakes taken was this one here, and those flakes sharpen the edge. And I've shown this one already. This is the 9:1 width to thickness ratio point that I showed. This edge is still pretty sharp. This is not sharp on this side very well, a little bit. But as you can see, it's not well developed, it's not, doesn't have any micro flaking or any really intense sharpening as far as delicate sharpening. It may have been broken in manufacture and not quite finished yet, but I can't tell. This one's probably an impact fracture. It may have a fracture on this side slightly, and that's probably broken in manufacture on this one. Okay, so that's those. I think that's the end of my Montell collection. I'm going to move into the other types. Now, these types are about 2,000 years older than the Montells. These are Pedernales types and related forms. I think there's a few that are related or similar in shape. Now, some of these I can't guarantee that they are Pedernales. Like these first ones here, I've got a group of about 5 that have the ears rounded. They're almost like a bulbous type ears. So I'll show those. I'll show these first. Relatively thick point. 7/8 inch wide. So larger than 3/4, so it may not have been a projectile or a lateral dart point. It may have been a knife. And I've got a knife here that I made. It's not a reproduction, but it's kind of an average of a bunch of them that I've seen, where they cover the sinew wrapping with rosin or asphaltum, and there's a constriction right in the hafting area on the handle. I've seen a few that they shave down this area that's got the notch in it, so that I guess it's smoother in the transition between the sinew and the rosin and the handle. Anyway, so you can see it might have been a knife handle. I mean, it might have been hafted to a knife handle. This kind of point, although it may have been at lateral dart point. Not really sure, but I'm still going by that 3/4 inch width for that lateral dart point average. Some probably a little bit over, maybe 7/8. But if it's over an inch, I'm going to assume it's a knife. Okay. This one is semi-translucent. The edge is kind of sharp, but it's not as thin as the Montells. The edge is a little bit more beefy on this. And I haven't discussed, spear points, handheld spear points. I'm not sure if I should get into that because I don't have any surviving examples that I can point to. But it's possible these could have been handheld spear points. Okay. And like I said, most of these are much older than the Montells. The Pedernales, like this type here, are at least 2,000 years older than the Montells. Okay. And there's probably some overlap in base forms, and they may all be classified as Pedernales, even with these rounded bulbous type bases and stems. There's bold thinning flakes coming up from the notch in the middle. It's pretty characteristic of Pedernales, but there are other types that have it also. A few other types. But these long thinning flakes that sometimes look like flutes are pretty common on the Pedernales points. I would guess that this is an impact fracture, impact snap. Although the base is pretty wide for a projectile point. It may have been, like I said, the tip of a handheld spear. It's these rounded ears can take a lot of damage, so there's a lot more kinetic energy if you're holding the spear and thrusting it rather than shooting it. Especially if you're hitting something very solid. If you're trying to pierce through a rib cage, trying to finish off the quarry, you'll hit a large bone, and that'll, unseat the point from the haft sometimes, and sometimes crush the ears. But if you make them stout, that won't happen. Okay. Now I'm going to show you some preforms here that I think you'll find interesting. Most of these were broken in manufacture, I think. I don't think any of these were completely finished except maybe this one. But you see how bulky it is in the middle. I'm not sure if this was actually finished. It may have been broken in manufacture. But you can see the long barb here, where some of these Pedernales points don't have any barbs, just small ones. Or just small ones. You can kind of see how they were either punching or pressure flaking these notches. The tool on this looks like it was a pretty hefty tool. This feels like it's not heat treated. and the stone is not, it's not good quality, so that's, it may be why there's a lump in the middle. Same with this one here. It does not feel heat treated. Well, well, I can't say that. It may have been, but the quality is not there. So this one looks to me like it was broken in manufacture. There's an obvious defect in the stone. And I'm not even sure if this is a Pedernales point. This here looks like it was broken in manufacture as well. Very nice preform, nice material. I know that this material, this gray stuff, is very nice when heat treated, so it looks to me like it has been heat treated at least a little bit to get these nice, long, seemingly thin flakes, and this kind of continuation on the flake where it doesn't stop here. It pops off a secondary flake before it terminates. With raw stone, a lot of times you just get it to stop. It'll stop sooner than carrying over. And there's a lot of bold flaking on this side. Now the base is quite large on this one, or quite wide I should say. And it's the stem, not the base. Almost 1.25 inches. Quite wide stem, so I would say it was a knife. Especially at the first stage. Maybe later it could be used as a spear point. This one I find very interesting. I can't tell if it's a completed, pristine point that just got snapped somehow by accident, or maybe over time. It looks like there may have been a flake taken here as one of the last flakes and then snapped in manufacture. But it looks like the base was well formed before this snap, of course. Okay. And you can kind of, if you do the symmetry on this, the point's going to be way out here. So it was quite a hefty point, and probably a knife, although it could have been hafted to that little dart foreshaft. Here's a thicker foreshaft. It's not inconceivable that it was hafted to something heftier. This is elm bast, by the way. I think I showed that in a different video. Kind of crude. There's no real finished flaking on this yet, so they may have not gotten to that stage. You can see the shape of the tool in this notch. They may have needed to refine this a little bit better, but it may have been just intended to be used in this way. I don't know. Another preform. This one is more crude as far as the overall shape. It has a lot of dips and bumps, and it's got kind of a twist to it. So it looks like they were going with the flow on this one. Going with the shape of the original spall, or doing it in a hurry or whatever, but it's not well defined like this one here, where it's got good symmetry in all directions and not much twist, and very thin. This one's got some heft here. Some step fracturing. It may have been a practice piece, but it looks like it was broken in manufacture in any case. Nice material though. You can see there was some defects in the material itself. You can see that here. It has a seam in it there. That's from the stone. It's not from the napping. Now, if you heat treat stone like this, a lot of times it'll break up. So this appears raw to me. I just heat treated a batch of stone similar to this that didn't work out. It broke up during the heat treatment. This is one of the most interesting preforms that I have. Of course, these are all borrowed points. They're not my personal collection. Very large or long basal thinning flake here. 2 stages, it looks like. Looks like there was some secondary flaking, or I'm not sure. I don't think that was all one strike that created that, but it might have been. Anyway, the reason why I find it interesting is because the way they developed these edges. And the fact that it's not straight. And the point comes in very quickly. It's hard to tell if that snapped off from a strike up here or a strike at the base somewhere. Strike at some other part that kind of caused an end snap. But here's one of the last flakes there. Now, there are other guys that try to replicate how they actually made large points, and not very many, if any, nappers preform their points in this way. You know what I'm saying? With such curved edges. And this is not from a lack of skill. You can tell it's skillfully made. The base is well formed. The stem is well formed. The material is not that easy. It does feel raw, or on the raw side, not very heat treated, if at all. It could have been. There are some indications it might be heat treated, because I feel some very sharp and kind of delicate thin spots that's common with heat treat, but I can't tell for sure. But if you're not developing your preforms in this way, at least for some of your points, then you're not doing it like they used to do it, at least in this area. And then I would say this is way wider than the finished point would be. The finished point would probably be, let's see if I have a one that's similar to this in completed form. I don't know. It may end up being this narrow. Let's see. You know what I mean? Yeah, this is a little bit too small. But I think you get the idea. This probably is not intended to be this wide. They would probably take it down a lot more to come up with something maybe something like this. It definitely would thin it down, and it would definitely help to straighten out these edges when it's more narrow. But I don't feel any grinding at all anywhere. There's no abrading. There's a little bit of work here, kind of like a brushing There's some small flakes taken off, like it was brushed slightly. It may have been soft hammer. Soft hammer, when you brush the edge with a soft hammer, it releases small flakes, small well-defined flakes. So this may have been developed with a soft hammer, reduced. But I just can't stop looking at this one because it gives you a lot of indication on how they were making these and what the first stage looks like when it's got its full width of the spall. That's 2 3/4, a little over 2 3/4. And the total point would be something like 4 3/4, maybe 4 5/8, 4.5 long. Pretty good size spall. This one also broken in construction, I think, broken in manufacture, but the base is well developed. It looks finished. So like the Montells, these were also done base first, it looks like. I'll need to check that in the book, but I think these were done base first also. Nice example of broken during manufacture, I think. I don't think this is an impact fracture. I think this was going to be a lot more narrow on this side especially. The notches are not the same depth. I don't think they finished developing this notch on this side. The tool is kind of narrow. The material is a good quality material, so you don't need a real hefty piece of antler or bone to nap this. But that's a pretty big pop out on that side. Very sharp on this edge. Kind of sharp on this edge. I don't feel any grinding or any platform development, except maybe right here. I do feel some abrading and some platform, possibly two platforms there, or they just struck in the middle. It was one big platform. It just struck in the middle and didn't go anywhere. But these two little bumps feel abraded. It's possible that's an overshot, but I can't tell, as we got some secondary flaking here. I don't know if that would occur from an overshot or not. Probably not. I don't know. But it does look like an overshot to me, now that I look at it. Okay, now we're going to get into some of the actual Pedernales style points. A little over an inch wide. I would say this handle is an inch wide here, so I would say it's a knife. Most of these Pedernales to me look like knife blades, or they could be spear points, handheld spear points. Edges are sharp on this one. Looks like an impact fracture both on the ear and the tip. Less than 1 inch wide. It could be a projectile point at lateral dart. That's kind of wide, but it's, I don't know, not impossible. But these ears would not be resting on wood. They'd be kind of hanging out, or just barely, which means that that notch is either a V notch on the inside or there was a lot of glue used, or both. Let's see, these translucent, yeah. Again, this one looks like a finished point with impact damage. The ears are not straight. So hafting it would be that way. That means the blade would be canted to one side. A fairly common feature. Looks like impact damage to me. Now, can you get impact damage like this on a knife? You can if you're fighting with it, I imagine, but I would tend to think more handheld spear would do that. It would be a very hefty at lateral dart if it was hafted to a foreshaft, at lateral dart foreshaft. And again, these ears would be, you know, not resting on wood. What would rest on wood would be the interior of that notch with a V-shaped notch in the foreshaft, or I should say inverted V in the foreshaft. Which is possible. Just seems like a lot of distance to span with wrapping. The greater the distance you span with your wrap, the greater the chance it's going to move, because the sinew really isn't holding, or the wrapping really isn't holding the stem very well when it's very wide. It's mostly the glue that would be holding the stem, but this is obviously designed to be wrapped. So I would, if it were me, I would use a much wider diameter foreshaft to haft these, or a knife handle, because that way you know you're sitting on wood if you do a flat bottom notch. This one has some heat damage after the fact. It looks like it's been reworked, resharpened. Edges are sharp. Characteristic thinning flake. Very nice quality material, very nice quality flaking. Symmetrical, very strong looking point. A little bit less than an inch wide stem. Looks like impact damage. It looks like the ears are fine, or the barbs are fine. Ears are fine, no damage there. Some calcium deposits around the edges from being in the ground. I like the design on this stem. I'm going to probably have to try to make a reproduction of this one. This is one of my favorites in here. And the material is really nice too. I think I've got a few pieces like that. And the stem, very, very damaged blade for some reason. But the stem is nicely made, well proportioned, and symmetrical. Okay,